Welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we aim to bring back civil discourse to our national dialogue. From Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And from Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And we've been out for a few weeks. Apologies to our audience for that, but we have a good reason. One of us just got married last week. Jesse, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What an exciting time. Thank you for being there, Tyler. It was so good to see you in person, in the flesh, and get to celebrate with you. That was, I'm over the moon still. I feel like I never stopped dancing, so...
It was definitely very hard to keep you from dancing or air guitaring.
Air guitaring, yes, of course.
But it was a great time. I mean, it was so awesome. I know many of the people who listened to this were there and saw that. So it was great to meet some of you guys at the wedding as well. But what a wonderful time, Jesse. I mean...
Yeah, thanks, bro. I really appreciate it. So glad that you were there. Obviously means the world to me. But, you're also lucky. Like, we got great weather while you were here, and then you left, and it has gotten cold as fuck. Like, horribly, horribly cold earlier this week. Just bitter cold and wind. And then because of that, though... As I sent you pictures, we got the Northern Lights, and I could see them from my home.
That was cool. That was unreal. And then I saw, it's funny because I read an article like a day later about how it was crazy visible like across the northern U.S. And of course, I have a good friend of mine who lives in Alaska who was like, look at this thing. And I'm like, that's wild. I was like, my friend sees that, but in like New Hampshire. Yeah. And she's like, that doesn't make any sense.
And that's so weird. Like, and the funny thing is, like, I had friends that were in Maryland as well as in Colorado who were seeing the Northern Lights, but they were only seeing the reds. They were not seeing the greens, which is so interesting because we got both.
Interesting. Is it like a frequency thing? Is it because of the wavelength of the?
I wish that
the light
in terms of the science, I don't understand it. Other than I know that weather has a significant factor in terms of what you can see, and then also, yeah, obviously, like how far north you are, the more you can see of the greens, apparently. But in New Hampshire, pretty far north in terms of the U.S., and it was cool. I had never seen the Northern Lights like that before. So that was definitely a bucket list thing for me. I wanted to see them. They've been visible a couple of times, but never quite like this since I've lived up here. And to be able to walk out into my driveway and like look up and see the Northern Lights, that was cool. Like there are just moments in life where it's like where you're reminded of how small we are, in terms of the world. Like the fact that huge swaths of the country were able to see this majestic, amazing thing, and that I was able to see that from my home, was really lovely. And it almost made it worth it, how cold it was during that day leading up to it. Actually, I say almost. It did. It made it worth it, but God, it was bitter cold, and I was just not thrilled about how cold it was prior to that. I mean, but the day of the wedding, man, how could I complain? Like, it hit 60. I was driving in a car with the windows down. Like, the lighting was perfect. The color was still on so many of the trees. Like, it just, it was perfect, and we're very happy with how it went. And, the best part of it was that it seemed like everyone else had a really good time as well, which mattered to us, so.
That was a great time. And, Aurora Borealis, man. I'm jealous about that. One day I'll see it. One day I'll see it.
Man. One day you will.
But unfortunately, one day we are going to see very soon is the government reopening.
Well...
And while normally I would be excited about that, and we would all be grateful about that. Unfortunately, this time I'm not quite as excited about the government reopening.
Well, technically the government...
Jesse, let's get into this first story here.
Yeah, technically the government has reopened. I mean, what a strange turn of events, right? I think from there was just this kind of creak of momentum of certain moderate senators who, including both New Hampshire senators, and rest assured, they will be receiving a call from me about this. Not that they listen to anything I have to say, but as a voter in this state, I was not thrilled when both Democratic senators were part of the 8 senators to vote to reopen the government. And the only reason that I'm upset about this personally, them reopening the government, is not that I like the pain of a shutdown. And I was pretty damn pissed last week when flights were getting canceled, and I was concerned about all these people flying in, to come to the wedding. And of course, that's a me personal thing. But I was all kinds of furious about that and how that was being handled. But what was this all for? What was this for? We used the healthcare fight as justification for it, and I told you back when the shutdown started, I had said, okay, now that Democrats have done it, they cannot cave on it. Like, I was in the either we don't do it and deal with the fact that Republicans are going to not give these healthcare subsidies, and that's going to be deeply unpopular for them, and it's going to hurt people. Or we do it, and we're going to hurt people because the Trump administration is going to hurt people over the course of this shutdown, and we're going to have to be able to deal with that pain as a means of leverage.
And the interesting thing about that is, it seemed at the time like we chose the fight, right? We chose to fight them and to push back, and it worked. I mean, look at the midterms. Like, we're not going to talk we're not going to talk a lot about, like, each result, but, like, if you look broadly, overwhelmingly Democratic victories across the nation.
Oh, it was an enormous win. Now let's put this into perspective just for a minute, okay? Because I don't want people to get ahead of themselves. Last Tuesday, the election day, which technically not a midterm, I guess that's an off-year election, whatever, but was a very good day for the Democratic Party. And the numbers, it wasn't necessarily who won, but it was the margins, right? Like, New Jersey governor winning by double digits, Abigail Spanberger, I should say Mikey Sherrill, the New Jersey governor, Democratic candidate, won. And then Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat from Virginia, won by a significant margin. And they now have a trifecta in Virginia. Again, Democrats now have control of all houses of government in Virginia. I mean, if you look across the board, like, my town's mayor race was about the only Republican victory in the entire state. And the only reason for that is that the guy... And while that happened, it's the first time in history in Manchester that we have 14-0 in terms of Democrats on the school board in Manchester. 14-0. We flipped all of that. They flipped the town alderman, basically the city council, all of that stuff flipped around. The mayor got reelected, but the mayor always gets reelected to a second term because the terms are only 2 years. So, like, generally people don't throw out a mayor or a governor in New Hampshire when we reelect everyone 2 years. But across the board, it was a great night for Democrats. There weren't very many reaches, okay? It's also, this is an election that would inherently favor Democrats. Like, it's going, the states that were up were lean blue states. The electorate that is more engaged and willing to vote is also a blue electorate. So I don't want people to read into it too much and feel like, ooh, but yeah, the reality is the shutdown certainly didn't hurt Democrats in the off-year election, and most polling was showing that Democrats were being blamed less than Republicans. I do think that there is some polling that showed and was starting to show that the public was viewing Democrats as wanting the shutdown to continue more than the Republicans, which was a little problematic. I also think there was some polling that showed that Republicans in Congress actually got a boost out of this shutdown. Somehow their numbers went up overall over the course of the shutdown, which is odd. Trump's numbers went down, but Republicans in Congress, their numbers went up, which is a weird kind of thing when we're looking at numbers. But yeah, it feels like we were winning. It feels like we were winning this fight, and Trump had just decided, okay, scorched earth, I'm going to punish the voters. It seemed like he was upset about the election, and he wanted to punish the voters of this country with the flights, right? He was just like, okay, we're going to start canceling flights. We're going to cancel them. We're going to make them feel it. Make them feel it. If this is what they want, they're going to get it. And I think what it came down to for those senators that decided to break with the party and give the Republicans just enough votes to reopen the government is that Democrats are just not comfortable with the amount of pain that Republicans are comfortable inflicting upon the American people. Donald Trump has no qualms about ending SNAP benefits and sending kids to school, or sending kids hungry, starving children, starving veterans, starving, single moms, all that. He has no qualms about that. He has no issues with canceling people's Thanksgiving plans or ruining their travel, into the holidays. He has no issues with that because he, views it as this is a tool for his power, right? This is a means of him getting what he wants, which is the government needed to be reopened and the Democrats needed to be beaten back. Democrats generally don't have the spine or the stomach is more, I think, a better term. They do not have the stomach for the amount of pain that Trump is willing to inflict on the people. What I'm frustrated by is what I said a month ago, which is that Democrats need to be prepared to let shit get worse. They need to be okay, and I hate it. It sucks. But letting the American people suffer the full extent of the consequences of the election of Republicans and of Donald Trump.
And do you think that's what we're seeing now with Schumer and the rest of the Democrats in Congress that have now kind of flipped on their decision to hold out the shutdown?
Well, Schumer didn't
to the
flip.
table and saying fine.
Schumer didn't flip. I know that I've seen a lot of this, but Schumer did not vote with the Republicans. He held the line. He just couldn't control his caucus, right?
I see.
So Schumer stayed. He did not vote to reopen the government. And that is I'm glad that you brought that up because I've seen a lot of that over the last couple of days. And I think that that's just people not understanding the what happened and why, and that's as nice as I'll be about Chuck Schumer. Okay?
A monumentous time. A monumentous moment in this podcast.
Right. I love that everyone now is like, Chuck Schumer should step down, as if we haven't been saying this for the last 9 months, right? Like the last 11 months. Like Chuck Schumer is not up to it. And this is coming from somebody who in the first administration, I still go back and I will give Chuck Schumer credit for holding the line really well in the first Trump administration. He had his caucus under wraps. I actually think he did a good job of controlling and managing people like Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema in the first Trump administration years. Clearly, Schumer has lost his ability to do that, and he does not have the stamina. No, but Schumer doesn't have the ability to communicate with the public or to manage his own caucus anymore. And if he can't do that, then he is essentially useless, right? He needs to step away from this position. But no, I think what we saw was a group of senators, and I think there were a lot more. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's a coincidence that Democrats only gave them the exact number of votes that they needed to reopen the government. 8 votes. Like, they could not have lost one of those people. They gave them the exact number that they needed to reopen the government in the Senate. I think there were probably 10 or 12 more that also were really, really feeling the heat, did not like the shutdown and the impacts it was having on federal workers, on their constituents. They were not comfortable with this. And as I said before, Democrats need to fucking get it through their head that this is not normal. The behavior of this administration is not normal. And the rules have changed a little bit. So playing politics as we have in the past is not fair, is not a good strategy. But also, we have to be willing to watch our constituents suffer a bit. And that sucks. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But that's the Trump administration's doing, right? We are always mitigating and being the adults in the room when they can't govern. We're always the ones that are bailing them out when they cannot govern. And they never bail us out when we're the ones governing, right? So, I don't know, Tyler, maybe you see this differently, but for me, I just think that this was an inability to stomach the pain, and I'm frustrated because it's clear that you had to if that was the case, then you should have just that you shouldn't have done the shutdown in the first place. If you weren't ready to deal with the fact that Trump would actively try to penalize and punish the American people for this, then you should not have done the shutdown. You should have just let them deal with healthcare, right? You should have complained about healthcare and given them the votes 2 months ago. We could have avoided the stupid shutdown, and we could be talking about how healthcare premiums are about to soar for everyone, and that's the Republicans' fault. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I never thought of it quite the way you've placed it with the stomach of the Democratic Party. And I think, and I'm glad you did, because it's been a struggle for me to kind of think of the right reason this would happen now, like why the caving happens now, and if they were willing to give in without any sort of negotiation in place, like actual, like tangible negotiation aside from a promise for a future vote, then there's no reason they wouldn't have just done that in the first place. Like, the Republicans could have said that, and they probably did in the beginning, and that would have been the end of it, but it wasn't. And it's been difficult to think of why it lasted this long before they finally agreed to something that was already like on the table from Republicans in some way, shape, or form, in terms of like a whole lot of nothing, but right, like a future vote at some point. And what you describe as their inability to kind of follow through with like the dirty strategy, that makes a lot more sense to me. That suddenly makes a lot of what they've been doing in terms of timing make a lot more sense. I think the timing is particularly bad, and something that's been bothering me. I think the timing of deciding to, because again, to the average voter, to the average me or you, right, it looks like they were holding fast on this notion of trying to save people's benefits, right, and premiums, and all of a sudden they just decided never mind. And the timing of that never mind came after an election that went very well in their favor, in the areas in which they were there were like significant votes or significant races. And I couldn't shake the feeling like optically it felt like they used the shutdown to gain the momentum, to gain the victories. And now that those victories have been achieved, they've kind of like dropped the fight, right? I know that might not be true. There's a lot more nuance to it, but optically to me, that's what it looks like, right? And that's the kind of thing that scares me a bit for what they're doing with the momentum that they were building up, and how that might just come falling all over themselves, and come the next election, come next year.
Yeah, I don't think that the election was especially impacted either way based on the shutdown, if I'm being honest with you. And if you look at the way the voters voted, I think very few of them were voting based on the shutdown, right? Like, I think that what is more evident and more clear is that, yes, independents have swung to voting. Again, you've seen some shifts back in the Democrats' direction on voters that they had lost a little bit. But more clear to me is that Republicans really struggle to win elections when Donald Trump is not on the ballot now. Um, Even with Joe Biden being an unpopular president in 2022 midterms, an immensely unpopular president, they still struggled and lost a bunch of races that they should have, in theory, should have won, right? The Republicans really did not have a good midterms in 2022. And I think that that gave a false sense of confidence. We've talked a lot about why Biden decided to run for re-election. I think that 2022 midterms was largely just the fact that Trump wasn't on the ballot. And Democrats continue to underestimate and this is the polling thing, right? Pollsters continue to underestimate the Trump effect. The fact that rural voters come out in such larger numbers for Trump and they don't show up when he's not on the ballot. And that was true of the Obama years, right? Republicans were always underestimating both black turnout, young youth turnout, voters that were not consistently always voting, did not come out when Obama wasn't on the election. That's why Democrats got shellacked in 2010. They got shellacked in 2014, right? They lost down ballot races all throughout the Obama years whenever Obama was not on the ballot, right? When Obama was on the ballot, they won elections, right? They won a lot of elections. So that's the kind of situation the Republican Party is in right now. And so I think when we read too much into the shutdown taking place at the same time as the election, I think that might be putting two things together that are not especially related. I really just think that for the reasoning as to why this shifted, I think was the flights. I think that Trump came out and said and realized there's one thing that he can do in the shutdown, which is he can cancel flights. The president can go and authorize and direct the FAA to go in there and start canceling flights nationwide. And because he did that, and he used the shutdown as the reasoning for that, he said, okay, we're going to start with 4% this week, and every Friday we're gonna boost it up by another 10% of flights. We're going to cancel each and every week. And we're just going to continue this on until, who knows what. I think that Democrats took him seriously, and I think they should have. I think that they realized he doesn't give a flying fuck. He will punish the American people. That is authoritarian playbook number one. He will punish the American people if he has to for the inability to get what he wants. And I think Democrats, and specifically some of these more moderate Democrats, realized we're never going to get him to budge on healthcare. He's never going to do it. And I really still to this day, I don't think if they had held on with the shutdown, and I don't agree with them bailing on the shutdown, but I also think going back on it, they shouldn't have done it in the first place in hindsight, right? They should not have done it if they weren't ready and prepared for this suffering. But I think that Democrats were not, they realized they weren't going to budge. Republicans, Trump was never going to approve these Obamacare subsidies. He's been trying to get rid of Obamacare since before he was a presidential candidate. He's been trying to get rid of Obamacare, right? He wasn't going to budge on this. And so they recognized there was only one off-ramp, which was to basically admit defeat on this, that this was a flawed strategy. And for the record, these Democrats, many of the people who wanted to continue the shutdown, wanted to shut the government down, but it had nothing to do with healthcare. I'm sorry that was the narrative that was pitched, and that was the way we got a consensus of people together to say, okay, we're going to oppose this, we're going to shut down the government. But for many of them, it wasn't about healthcare. It was just about putting up a fight, right? It was just about saying we are fighting Donald Trump. And the moderates got on board because of the healthcare issue. They were sold on this shutdown because of the healthcare issue, and that's something that we all cumulatively agree upon. But when they realized they weren't going to win on that issue, they're not invested in a, let's just give a middle finger to Trump. That's not their method of engaging, and they don't want to watch people suffer needlessly if they're not going to get anything out of it. So I don't agree with breaking the shutdown here. I would not have voted to reopen the government under these terms when we didn't get really anything. But I don't think we were going to win. I really don't. I think that the American people were going to continue to suffer, and maybe we would have gotten more than what we got, but I don't think we were ever getting the main goal, which is the subsidies for Obamacare. I just don't think we were ever going to get that. And they're giving us a vote. It's never going to come to a vote in the House or pass in the House, and even if it did pass in the House, Donald Trump is not going to sign it into law, right? He's just not going to do that, and we don't have the votes to override a veto, a presidential veto. So there was no path to the Obamacare subsidies happening. The only path to that is people feeling the pain and forcing their hand. And that's going to happen regardless.
Well, if there was no path, then what other reason was there to hold the shutdown in the first place? If there was never going to be a path at all.
As a sign of, it was a political, in many ways, it was a political shutdown. It was to show we are fighting Trump. I think John Fetterman made a good point in that he said, and I haven't agreed with a lot of what John Fetterman has said in the last couple months. I want to be very clear. We've defended him, but he is pushing my patience right now, right? Okay? He is testing my patience of moderation right now. But I do think that he was right when he said that doing this shutdown was... There was no... The goal was not clear to him from the start, because he was opposed to the shutdown from the beginning. He said, this doesn't make sense. I don't think we can win or get anything from the American people. People are going to suffer for what feels like a political argument. What I said in the moment was, if you're going to shut the government down, you have to be prepared for it to be shut down for a long time. And I get this was the longest shutdown in history. It wasn't long enough to do what you needed to do. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't.
Well, it wasn't long enough if you don't get what you fought for, right?
We got nothing. I don't care what anybody says. People are like, oh, well, they agreed to rehire all the people that got fired as part of the shutdown. Yeah, because the shutdown happened. Those people wouldn't have gotten fired if the shutdown wasn't there. So that's it's ridiculous. Like that's your point? Oh, these people suffered, but now they'll get their jobs back. Good job. Way to go. I don't know. Democrats I'm pretty pissed off right now. And I'm not necessarily pissed off just because they reopened the government. I'm pissed off because they shut it down in the first place without being prepared to take it all the way. If that was the case, they should have just fucking...
So now it just looks like a period of basically suffering for no reason.
Right.
To the American people, right?
Pointless.
And to federal employees across the nation.
What was all this for? I don't know. And we're going to have to deal with that. But...
And again, like I know you don't make the connection to the recent elections, and maybe there's less of one, but I still think that, like, when you think politically, right, when you look at what this is going to reflect on the Democratic Party, is I felt like in the middle of the shutdown, they felt like people fighting for the right cause, right? They felt like the good guys, and I don't mean that just because I'm one of them, but you know, history is written by the winners, right? And so my thing is, now that it's over and we've lost effectively by allowing the government to reopen with zero concessions, the Republicans and the people in power in the government, in the executive branch, are going to spin this to say, well, guess what? They just made all of you suffer for nothing. Like, they could have done that day one and none of this would have happened. But instead, they decided to make you suffer and make you not get paid and furlough people, you know, for practically months. It's going to feel like Democrats caused a lot of abject suffering for no reason because we got nothing out of it. And that's the kind of fear I have coming out of one small election and going into a much bigger one next year, and kind of just a apprehension over what that's going to look like optically because of how this is ending, or how it's ended already.
Yeah,
Really,
I'm less concerned about next year than you are, probably, because pe- people's memories are so small, like so short, and even like historically, shutdowns that happen, before elections, over a year before an election, or a year before an election, have not really, like, those are not the issues that people go to the polls about. A year from now, do you think most average Americans who aren't political hacks are going to be talking about the shutdown of last fall? Like, I just don't. I don't think that really factors in to people's mindsets with elections. And I think they have bigger things to be focused on, which affordability. I think the number one thing is, and that's the good thing, that's the takeaway from this most recent election, is that all the candidates, whether moderates like Mikey Sherrill or Abigail Spanberger, in Virginia and or in New Jersey and Virginia, respectively, or Zoran Mamdani in New York City, they all ran on affordability and they all won pretty significant victories. So that issue, if Democrats can stay on message for that issue and can actually propose some solutions that make sense about affordability, I think will carry them next year. So I don't think we're going to be talking about the shutdown 11 months from now as we come into the midterm elections. I really don't. I think that so much is going to happen.
that's a fair point.
So much has already happened.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I think, yeah, we have another breaking story that literally happens days after this, right? But I think you're right. I think more than staying on message is, especially with these interesting races like New York mayor, for example, which has me holding my breath, happy but holding my breath, is we will need success, like actual success, before election season comes next
Oh,
year.
I wouldn't hold your breath
To
on success in New York City. Sorry.
Yeah, well,
uh,
but that's the thing, right? It's like we can run on these policies and stay on message, but if we fail to have some success on that policy from now till then, it's going to be much more difficult for us to continue running on that, right?
yeah.
Because of what the Republicans are already preparing to run on, which is an expectation that the Mandami is going to fail, right? That things will get worse there. I don't know. I hope not. But they're preparing for that to happen. And if anything outside of what they would see as success, right, policy-wise, happens,
Yeah.
that's what we're going to be up against.
Yeah, you're right. And we'll see how that goes. I do think that for most people, though, the vast majority of Americans know who's in charge of the government right now. They know that it's Donald Trump. They know that Donald Trump basically speaks the platform for the Republicans, and that the Republicans, outside of a few people who are clearly opportunistic, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are trying to kind of distance themselves and like become the new face or new voice of MAGA, whatever that means. I think most Americans are going to hold the Republicans to account for what's gone on, rather than expecting the Democratic governor of Virginia or the Democratic governor of New Jersey or even the Democratic Socialist governor of New York City. Like, I don't think that 1 year in is going to be enough to quite have given a mandate of, wow, we can govern in those situations. I do think that Mamdani is the biggest risk because his proposals, regardless of how you feel about them, have the most risk of blowing up badly, right? Of like actually really harming things, right? And that could be a very bad look for the party. But I think in general, Democrats need to take a lesson from the election and say, okay, let's let moderates run in moderate states. Let's let progressives run in progressive districts and cities and states. Like, let's do that, and stop eating each other. There should be no firing upon other Democrats. There should be no more of this. We're done. Like, we're done with that. Let's let the best candidate for the place that they are representing be the nominee, and let them govern as they want to. So I'm, as you said, I'm happy about Mamdani winning because I'm not a Cuomo fan, and certainly didn't want to Curtis Sliwa with his silly beret, to be mayor of New York. I also don't live in New York, and I think the New York mayor's race totally blown out of proportion. I said this, I posted this on the Instagram, and I got some interesting feedback on it, but Boston, was the first city to have a young progressive mayor, who also just got reelected unopposed. First time in 30 years that the Boston mayor has run unopposed for reelection. She got 93% of the vote because she's fucking fantastic. Michelle Wu is an absolutely fantastic progressive young mayor. The difference between her and Zoran Mamdani, she was experienced and qualified for the job coming into it. And I know people are going to get mad, whatever. They can get mad as they want. Zoran Mamdani is not qualified based on the qualifications I would want for governing one of the biggest cities in the world. Michelle Wu had served on city council for the better part of a decade. She had been involved in passing legislation. She had been involved in public projects. And what has she done since she's been there? She's not talk. She's an action mayor. Boston is a better city because she is mayor of Boston. She is a popular mayor because she has done work. She does not worry about the sound bites. She doesn't worry about picking fights with people. She gets shit done. And that's what Democrats need to be good at and focusing at. And that's a progressive mayor who actually works within the system, understands the system they're working within, is not trying to blow it up, but is rather trying to make a city better. And I'll tell you, like, Boston, incredibly expensive, all of that, incredibly expensive city. There are problems, right? But you've been to Boston. You've been to Boston recently, right? Tell me that's not a clean fucking city. Like, tell me that is not, like,
Oh my goodness. Listen, I can go for a lot longer than I should
city
about how much I love Boston. But I think one of the most salient things I heard from my wife, actually, because it was her first time in Boston coming over the weekend, right? I'd been there before. I was showing her around what I knew to be, major points of the city. Of course, it's beautiful. Of course, weather was the right season to go to, so the weather was nice. But I think beyond all that, right? Beyond like kind of like the circumstances of the time of year, it was exceptionally clean. And something that my wife told me was, it is for a city that feels like big and bustling, like a Los Angeles, like other cities that are just kind of equally just, dense and popular. It is 1,000 times cleaner, but also like 1,000 times more pedestrian friendly and kid friendly. Like there's so many children, like young, like toddler age children running around like without any concern. There are parks, like closed in parks designed for kids, maybe every like 3 blocks in like the main area, like near the pier, right? Like that whole large kind of area there. Parks like every few blocks, perfectly clean. There's bike lanes that are so clearly defined, even bike lanes that are raised above like the normal like sidewalk, right? That are made with a different asphalt and everything, so it's very clear that is a specific lane of the sidewalk that is meant only for cyclists. Next to the walking areas, the lights look fine. Like the lights work. Like I was seeing, very rarely was I seeing like active like construction happening, or broken, public works and public services right around. It was just it just felt very friendly. the entire city felt extremely friendly. And for my wife to say that was very surprising. Um, and she defends LA too. She's like an LA like super defender, right? Even though LA has a lot of issues in all the things I just mentioned, right? Uh, she'll defend it. And she went to Boston and she was like, "Oh yeah, this is never mind. Like this is what I would expect of something that is meant to be kind of like people friendly, right? Like pedestrian, family friendly, but also clean and inviting, and so easy to get around in. Uh, it was it was really fun to see her kind of like in awe, not of the things in Boston, right, but of the city itself, of the city, of like the way it's structured and its amenities. You know, when I went there, you were with me, you know, like when I went there for the first time ever, I was like, wow, the history, wow, the commons, you know, like, wow, like Boston Library, like, holy crap, one of the most incredible like buildings in the States I've ever seen, like, holy shit. And, you know, when she went, she was like,
Yeah.
wow, like the sidewalks. Wow, like the intersections, you know, wow, the lack of like, you know, grime and pollution, and all that. Uh, and that was really cool. That was a really cool thing to see. I think it just gave me insight to something that I didn't really have a like knee-jerk reaction to, but she very clearly did. And I think that's worth mentioning
Yeah.
about a city like that, right? And like you said, it's clearly
Yeah,
that is when you
and
know
so,
you've done something right.
and that's my thing. Like, you know, like, and don't get me wrong. For anybody who lives in Boston, Boston has problems. Like every city has problems, right? Um, but I think Boston's on the way up, right? Like I think that it is moving in the right direction. Um, I have not always felt that way about them from the political perspective and the way that the politics of the city have worked in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York City in recent years, right? Chicago. Like, I don't think that's true of every city. But I do think she's done a great job, and she doesn't get nearly as much attention. Some of that may be a gender thing, but a lot of it is just a New York bias. New York gets a ton of attention, but this idea that like Mamdani is going to be the leader of the progressive movement going forward, I just haven't seen that from New York mayors of past, right? Like what New York mayor has actually been able to launch themselves into higher position? Whether it was Rudy Giuliani, Michael Bloomberg, Mayor Dinkins back in the day, whether it was Eric Adams, whether it was Bill de Blasio. But any of these people, like, they've run for higher offices, they have never won. Because, and it's the same thing with like Mayor of Los Angeles. Mayor of Los Angeles never goes anywhere because it feels like it is a job.
Well, they go to India.
Yeah, fair. It feels like it is a toxic job. It is a very, very difficult job to be good at. You get stuck in the mud. You don't learn how to work across the aisle because you don't have to. And the policies that you put forward as such tend to not be popular. So if Mamdani is not popular for the things that he does in a couple of years, I would not be surprised at all because New York City does not tend to the love of New York City, of its mayors, does not tend to last very long, right? The honeymoon ends pretty quickly. It always has. And I don't see him personally becoming, president of the United States one day. Now, he can't run for president of the United States, right? He was born in Uganda. So either way, I don't see Mamdani ending up becoming Senator Mamdani or Governor Mamdani. I don't see it personally. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that
well, it's like what you say about California,
yeah.
right? It's like when you work in California politics, you gain the ire of the rest of the country politically, and people just don't like you. But also, when you're in a place that is so like you're gonna experience negativity so frequently, just by nature of your job, not because you might be doing a bad job, just because of the way it is. People don't care about when you do a good job, right? Like that's the reality. Right? So when you do a good job, nobody cares. and it's the same thing when you think about, like, when you mentioned Michelle Wu, right, and her work in Boston. When you do a good job, nobody cares.
Right.
Like, there's no reason to talk about it. Everyone wants to talk about the bad job that, I don't know, like Mayor Bass does, or Governor Newsom does, or maybe that, if God forbid Mandami, something happens, right? They'll talk about everything that happened bad, right? That's always what people want to focus on. And so you end up, like, your legacy nationally always ends up being an accumulation of your failures.
Yeah.
As opposed to an accumulation of your successes.
That's a great point.
Even if there's only like one failure, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it unfortunately is like, it's the curse of leadership, in a lot of these situations. You either fade to obscurity because you were good at your job and nobody cared, or you become a spotlight because you force your way into it, or you were placed under that spotlight because you messed something up. And if you force your way into it, a la Newsom, that's also never going to work, as we're seeing, right? As you see with the way Newsom's kind of seen outside of California.
Yeah, though.
It's like you're not...
To his credit...
You're not looked at favorably.
To his credit, Newsom's doing a good job of changing his brand a little bit, yeah. I think he's done a very good job at that. But
I mean, he has to. I think. Listen, I think he's a very good politician. I think he's a very good politician. There are a lot of issues with him.
Yeah.
And I think he thinks too highly of himself, and too much of himself on a national stage, because he believes that, like, his approval ratings in California would be his approval ratings nationally.
Gavin Newsom thinks highly of himself? This is news to me. He has an ego?
Yeah. How do you know? I mean, have you seen the slick back hair, man?
Oh my God.
You'll see tomorrow he's going to start, like, coming into, like, press conferences with, like, frizzled hair.
Yeah.
And he's going to be like, look, I'm just like you. I'm just... Oh, man. But but that's just, again, that's kind of just the way things end up being. Michelle Wu might never run for another public office. And if she does, people might not even know who she is or what she has done, because she's just done too good a job.
And you know what? The thing is, I think she might. I think she has done such a good job in Boston and has been so effective at governing that I do think Michelle Wu could be potentially governor of Massachusetts. I think that she has a chance of being potentially a senator in Massachusetts if she wanted to do that. She's smart, she's pragmatic, and she's progressive. Like, she gets shit done, and that is my biggest critique of people on the far left, is that they don't know how to work within the realm of government to get shit done, and that's a generalization, but it is often true. Michelle Wu is an exception to that. She is firmly progressive, but brilliant, of course, and fantastic at getting things done. And I hope that that's Mamdani.
But are there opportunities for her to work across the aisle in a state, or rather a city, as blue as Boston, the state as blue as Massachusetts?
No, she doesn't have to, and that's true per se. And on a national level, she would have to be very different. But I do think that it is important to understand that, yes, Massachusetts is a very blue state, but if you look at our governors, the last, 25 years, like Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts. Before our current governor, we had a Republican, a two-term, very popular governor in Charlie Baker, who was a Republican, like a moderate Republican. Massachusetts has elected a Republican senator during the Obama era. Scott Brown was elected senator to replace Ted Kennedy in this kind of backlash to the Democratic Party. So it is not unheard of for Republicans to be able to win statewide elections. There are plenty of Republicans who live in the state of Massachusetts. So in Boston itself, not so much, right? Boston's a very, very liberal place, but she governs with a common sense approach that I think is is beneficial. I just do. I think that she has the ability, but that's my own personal, maybe bias. Granted, I don't live in Massachusetts or Boston, but I live, an hour away, right? Like I care about the city. It is the major metropolitan city. And I love the city. I love going there. I feel safe going there. And I appreciate the work that she's doing. But Michelle Wu, come on the podcast, please. We would love to have you. It would be fantastic. But we do need to touch on the big breaking news of the last 48 hours, which is dun dun dun, the Epstein files. The Epstein files. We have, but his emails. Hashtag but his emails. No, we have emails from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell that seem to confirm that Donald Trump knew about whether he participated or not is still up for debate or not. But it does seem to confirm that Donald Trump knew that there was inappropriate behavior happening. And
there were some that indicate, I guess I say indicated as opposed to proved, right? Indicated that he did in fact spend time in proximity of
one of the victims.
One or more of his victims.
Though it
right.
does seem to insinuate that he did not do anything. In fairness to Trump, it does seem to insinuate that. What seems... My takeaway from this is that... And it's interesting because, the administration keeps coming out and saying, like... They've used the word creep about Epstein, right? Like, Donald Trump was friends with Epstein until he realized he was a creep, and he cut him out of his life, right? He disinvited him, kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, whatever. If Donald Trump knew he was a creep, why didn't he report it? Like, that's the thing. Like, for anybody that's familiar with, like, the Penn State scandal from the early 2010s that took down Joe Paterno, who was the football coach at Penn State, and Joe Paterno lost his job months before he passed away due to his 30-year defensive coordinator, assistant coach, being a pedophile who had molested young boys. And the assertion was that Paterno at least knew that there were reports of this and had not done enough to combat it or to report Sandusky, right? The perpetrator, Jerry Sandusky. To the point that Paterno, his statue was taken down outside of the football field. This was a whole thing that happened. The school was penalized, all of this. And I hold Jeffrey Epstein right there with Jerry Sandusky, who will be spending the rest of his life in prison and has been spending the last decade plus in prison and should. He can burn in hell for all I care. When you are assaulting anyone, much less children. And Jeffrey Epstein, assaulting minors, right? Assaulting women, assaulting minors, and that's horrific behavior, right? So they can burn in hell for all I care. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in hell, but if it does exist, I hope that they go there, right? But I also hold that for Ghislaine Maxwell, this woman who was responsible for recruiting women to go to...
She effectively is the groomer. Right. But the groomer of the pair, and that's equally as culpable of pedophilia and rape and all that stuff as is the actual perpetrator, right?
Meanwhile, we're finding out that she, in prison, Trump can't pardon her, right? Trump knows that to pardon her would raise way too much suspicion. But all of a sudden, she's getting all sorts of extra privileges. She's getting her mail hand-delivered to her. She's been moved to a different facility where she gets to, roam around. It's not a maximum security facility and where she was. Clearly, they're trying to keep her happy. That's clear. They're trying to keep her happy and keep her from saying potentially what she could say or what she knows. I don't know if Trump is guilty of anything more. I think that the likely answer, based on what I see, is that Trump was well aware that Epstein was a creep and just Trump likes girls, but maybe drew the line at minors. I don't know if that's true. Um, but he certainly seemed to know that what Epstein was doing, and he didn't report it, right? He didn't report it. And so if he knew he was a creep, then why didn't Trump do more about that, right? There is an ethical question of why didn't you do more to address this situation? But nobody seems to care about this, right? Like Trump just gets away with all sorts of things. I hope that's not the case with this. Um,
Right. But that's also why, and listen, like I'll preface this with like I understand the importance of accurate journalism, right? Like we only here on the pod we only want to like state the facts as we know them, right? Like these emails are not a smoking gun of Trump committed these heinous acts, right? Like that is just a fact. But but even if it's clear that these emails corroborate a lot of what we understood to be more than likely truth, right? That he was aware of it, that he was friends with Epstein when Epstein was doing this, knew it was happening and did nothing about it, and may or may not have been in the at least vicinity when Epstein had some of his victims around. It's still, I think it's still important to draw certain, I don't want to say assumptions, but draw the line. Like there are certain lines we kind of have to draw, right? Like I feel like it does no good to say, well, guess what? Like Trump didn't do this, so we're not gonna like assume that he did, or we're not gonna like kind of draw from it what might have happened as a result, right? I think there is still because it's so ambiguous, right? It's so close. Like, yes, nothing is there a smoking gun, but it's so close. Like, I feel like asking the question of like, but did he? But was he, like, asking that question still important, right? Like not dismissing the possibility of that happening is important, to keep it kind of like as a, I don't want to say a strong possibility, but as a possibility, right? As something that has never been proven false. And yet, and everything around it, Watergate style, right? Everything around it is true, just not that thing. I still think there is an importance on pointing that out. That while this is not proven, damn, is everything around everything else around it being shown to be true. And we should still question whether or not that's a possibility, whether or not Trump did engage in those acts to any degree. To any degree. Is it possible? Yeah. Oh yeah, it's possible. And it's becoming more and more possible with more evidence that comes out. I think that's an important point to continue to make, right? That the possibility only gets stronger as this evidence comes out. Yes, it's not proving anything. And we won't say that it is proven until it is, if it ever is. But damn, is the possibility getting stronger. And that needs to be a part of, when you think political strategy, that needs to be a part of the strategy that we have, right? Not lying, right? Because we know how litigious Trump is. We saw him go after the BBC very recently, and other news organizations. He's very litigious, and news organizations, journalists, other politicians need to be very careful when they are coming after Trump in this way, because that's just the way the judicial system works in America, is that we have to be careful about what we say always. But within that like careful rhetoric, we cannot we can't drop the point, right? We can't drop the strategic argument that the possibility that Trump engaged in these things is rising. The probability that he did is rising. And it's not going down. There is nothing like that is decreasing that probability. And when you look at, and when you draw lines between what's coming out, emails, etc., what Trump's defense is, what people in his own party are doing. You draw those lines, and that possibility gets a little stronger, right? And I think that argument is important to hold on to carefully. And again, we can't, like, nobody should be going out saying he is a pedophile. He is, whatever. Like, he is what Epstein was, right? Can't say that, but damn, we can say that it's becoming more of a possibility.
Certainly, that's a great point. There's certainly questions that are being brought to the surface here by this. I also just want to say, if he is innocent, if there is nothing in these files that is damaging to him, and I continue to be curious as to if there were issues, why the Democrats, I posed this several months ago, why would the Democrats not have used that if there were issues or things that were damaging to him in these files? But he certainly
I think there's lots of different possibilities as to why.
Sure, and that's fair. And we've talked about that before, but I'm curious as to why. But why is he acting so guilty? Just today, he has summoned Lauren Boebert, who was one of the people voting to release the files. She has signed her name onto this. He has summoned Lauren Boebert to the White House, to the Situation Room, to try and sell her on this. He has been apparently playing phone tag with Nancy Mace, who, by the way, Nancy Mace has gone off the deep end. Apparently she lost her mind on some people in South Carolina. There's a lot of concerns, even from her colleagues, about her mental health. Nancy Mace has become a different... No, I'm serious. I'm not even joking about this. She went off on Michael Smerconish several weeks ago when he asked a very simple question. Like, her fuse right now is really, really short, and even her staffers are apparently concerned about her mental health. But that's a whole nother story about Nancy Mace, who has, gone from being an LGBTQ advocate in the Republican Party to using trans slurs against her colleague, Sarah McBride, in Delaware. Like, they did just disgusting sort of turnaround. We don't know what's going on with her, but Trump has apparently been playing phone tag with her throughout the day, trying to get her on his side to try and block the release of these files. He is acting like a guilty party. He is acting like he is very nervous about these files being released. You don't usually act that way if you have nothing to hide. And so there seems to be something. Now, if this is the worst, if this is it, that we have these emails, like, this is not enough of a smoking gun, I think, to sink him, right? It should be. It probably should be. Like, we should be able to sit there and say, yeah, but, like, if he knew about this, it's...
Well, it's right. Corroborating stuff that we kind of already knew. Right. Like, if this is going to sink him, then the Epstein stuff from 2 years ago would have sunk him. But if that didn't, this is not going to make much of a dent. It's only going to further persuade people who already were on the fence about it, like certain Republicans and most, if not all, Democrats. But it's only going to convince those who already were questioning it. And that's the reality of where we are. But he certainly looks... the administration is acting like he's guilty. And that speaks some volumes. To me, that speaks some volumes. Why did you have the director of the FBI in these meetings with Lauren Boebert today? Like, why are you clearly trying to influence the public? And so here's what's coming up, okay? People think, okay, there was this delay to seat this Democratic representative because she's the 218th signature to get this brought to the floor. I think there's going to be a large number of Republicans, more than what signed on to this petition. I think there's going to be more than what signed on to the petition that vote in favor of releasing the Epstein files. It's going to go to the Senate. I have no idea whether it will have enough votes in the Senate. I don't know.
I hope it does, but I don't know. If it gets through the Senate, it has to go to Trump. Do you think there is any way that Donald Trump is going to sign the release of the Epstein files? Because I do not. I do not. If there is something in there that he's that concerned about, I don't see him signing a release on it, and I don't see us getting a veto from a Republican majority to be able to force it out.
Though I think a veto from Trump would probably be the closest thing to a smoking gun we can
Right.
ask for, right?
I hope we get there, because that would be, I mean, MAGA world and their crazy conspiracy, it would be really tough for them. That would be a test to see if they can
I wouldn't
actually
even
stick with
think
them.
about I wouldn't even think about MAGA, the base first. I'm thinking of, Republicans in Congress, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we already have people questioning things in Congress, right? Republicans in Congress already questioning, well, is there something that we have to be concerned about in regards to Trump? Trump vetoing something like this, I feel would be, I don't know if it would be enough, but it certainly would make a lot of Republicans start to think maybe we should veto his veto, right? And force it to pass. I think we'd have at least a few, the ones that we already know are questioning things, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have a lot more if it got to that point.
Yeah. The reality is, if he has nothing to hide, why would he risk this political debacle that he's stepping into to try to stop it, right? Because this is not good for him politically.
Right. And he's not doing a great job of putting out the fire.
Right. He can't
he's
seem
not,
to figure it out.
And he's not bad at that. That's the thing. He's pretty good at deflecting things, as we all know, right?
He's Teflon
all that stuff.
Don. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He is very good at deflecting. When things are genuinely not a concern to him, he can brush that off his shoulders so easily. And as we've seen from the beginning, this is the one piece of dirt on his nose that he cannot seem to get off.
Yeah.
And now he is, and you can see in the way, I mean, some people would maybe say, oh, well, it's because he's crazy in the head or whatever. Now, I don't subscribe to that as much. I think it literally is, he just has no more defense.
Yeah.
His strategy's gone. Now he's just, he's in, please, dear God, let it go away mode. And it's beginning to turn, it's beginning to show, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
His very messy strategy. But I don't know, do we have any expectation of further files being released at this point in time, or was that it? Was that the big expose, and now it's just fallout from that?
I don't know. We just don't know. The reality is, it's gonna pass the House. This bill or this proposal to force the release of the files is gonna pass the House. It'll go on to the Senate. The long and the short of it is, this is not going away. And for Democrats, that's a really good thing, right? The longer that this goes on, the longer that this sows unrest and sows questions and doubt in people's minds about Trump's role in Epstein, is better for the party, right? Because significant portions of Americans are just conspiracy theorists, which we've talked about extensively now. So we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I hope that this is not the worst of it. And the only reason, and I say that, politically, I hope this is not the worst of it, right? Do I want the
because we need more,
right? But do I want the President of the United States to have been involved in pedophilia? Of course not. I don't. I think that's bad for the country. That's bad for the world. I don't want that. But politically, if we're talking about a means of taking down the most dangerous man to ever sit in this office, if it's true, I want to know. If it is true, I want to know, and I want to get to the bottom of it, and I want him to finally be held accountable for something. I've
Right.
long given
It's
up.
justice.
Right.
We deserve, everyone deserves justice. We deserve to see our justice system work the way it was designed to and intended to work, where criminals are held accountable for their actions and face punishment, right?
I have
Face the
long
discipline
given up the belief that he's going to go to jail, right? Like
right.
that ended with the
But
election.
there's more than one way to
last
face
year.
justice, right?
Yeah. His legacy is what we need to be addressing, because there is a legitimate movement and a legitimate possibility that Donald Trump's legacy will go down with the likes of Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. And I hate to say that. And I don't say that as somebody who thinks that he is beneficial, but think about, and I disagree with Reagan on everything, but think about how the Republicans have done such a good job because Reagan was so popular, because he had such a significant popularity base and he was such an influential and consequential president. Ronald Reagan is the name of an airport. Like, he's a major, major figure. He was constantly cited. I don't doubt that Trump could go down in the ranks of presidents who get referenced by the Republican Party for a long time as having been a great president, even when he wasn't. And that's how I feel about Reagan, right? And so the Trump ballroom. Like, what needs to happen is there needs to be something that is so demonstrably devastating to his legacy that Republicans need to run from his legacy rather than towards it. And I feel like the Epstein files is the last possible thing that could potentially sway enough voters in this country into finally understanding that Donald Trump is not a good man. He is a really thoroughly, at his core, a bad human being and has been a bad president. And it sucks that we have to hope, I say hope, but we have to, sit here and think that the only chance of proving that is to prove that he's a pedophile or that he was involved with a pedophile. But I'm not sure what else might break through the skulls of the cult, right? Of the cult that is the MAGA movement. And that sucks. But that's where I stand on that. But with that, thank you again for listening in this week. We missed you all. Appreciate you for tuning back in. We will be back next week, and we're excited to be able to share more stories with you. Thank you so much, everyone that has congratulated me or wished me well on this next chapter of my life. I'm very grateful for that. Even in some of the darkest times, it is nice to be able to find some light and a reason to celebrate in this world. And I am a very, very lucky man, so I'm grateful for that. But with that being said, from Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And this has been another episode of Reunited States. Follow us on Instagram at Reunited States Pod. When the whole world has got you down and there's no one else around, turn that crown right upside down.